Welcome to New Tracks Workshop. My name is Jim Kello. I'm the creator and host for New Tracks, where mentors help modelers build. Thanks so much for coming. I hope you come back often and tell your friends about our show. These Saturday workshops are a new project for New Tracks. They've resulted from comments I've received from modelers about Scratchbuilding and Chris Blackmar's interest in producing and leading this effort. The segments are structured like the popular build-along segments on our Wednesday evening shows, except these Saturday shows are designed to show modelers how to scratch build a model. I personally believe that scratch building is one of the most creative parts of model railroading, and I think you'll agree if you try it. Here is your opportunity to work with some skilled modelers to learn how to do it. You will learn the steps, the skills, the techniques involved in scratch building a model in any scale you want. There are no kits to buy, only the needed scratch building supplies. The plans that will be used for the model, you can download on your computer at no cost. The show's moderator, Chris Blackmar, is a very talented and artistic modeler, and he and his guest will guide you through the complete scratch building process, one small step at a time. After all, that's what mentoring is all about. If you're a beginner, I hope you'll join in and experience the thrill of completing a scratch-built model and being able to stand back and say, I built that. If you're a more experienced or advanced modeler, I hope you'll join in and offer your advice and knowledge to less skilled modelers, and even get some fresh ideas yourself. The live shows will, of course, be recorded on our YouTube channel, so you can refer to the information later if you need to. In addition, I hope you'll visit our website, newtracksmodeling.com, and subscribe. You'll need to confirm your email that you received to verify your address. And after that, you'll receive all of the notice of our future shows, as well as the login links to attend. If you would prefer to watch the series on YouTube, you can do that by going to our channel, New Tracks Modeling, ring the bell, and click all. Therefore, you'll get all of the notice for the start of all of our future shows on the channel. If you can spare a little time, I hope you'll consider joining our management team to help us plan and produce any of our future shows. Please contact me at jimkello@newtracksmodeling.com, and let's discuss your interest. So welcome to the New Tracks Workshop. I look forward to seeing your finished models and, of course, hearing any suggestions for future shows you may have. Now, here is Chris Blackmar to start your scratch building journey.
All right, well, welcome everybody, and let's kick off this show with the tradition that we're trying to instill. And if Father Ron would lead us through the modeler's prayer to get us going today, please.
Oh God, as we express our creativity by creating in miniature the world around us, may we marvel at the beauty and genius which created the world and instilled in us a portion of your great knowledge and wisdom. Give success to the work of our hands, O God. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, let's get this show on the road. To begin with, I am drinking amaretto coffee this morning, so pull up your cup of coffee, your can of soda, or what other drink you may have, and sit back, relax. This show's format is going to be a little bit different again. As you can see, I'm still playing with formats a little bit. And quite frankly, I'm going to take a little bit of heat for this show. When I originally sat down and considered the entire scratch building process, I had put aside 3 shows to dedicate to signs, because signs are really important in a model. We can use them as in various functions to support the model in a multitude of different ways. And so today's format and today's show is basically going to be just a discussion on signs and how to use them, the type of signs, what's appropriate, what's not, and tricks that the more advanced modelers can share with the beginning or newer modelers out there. And I'm going to try to lead the discussion a little bit down through this rabbit hole that we're going to go down. This one is really, I want to take it to a more of an advanced level, because I feel that the signs are something that anybody can utilize at any point on any model and really apply the various different formats, et cetera, to their models. And it's just something that we can all learn from. So it's going to be really important that the more experienced modelers really feel comfortable to give us a bunch of information on this. And wouldn't you know, my phone has decided to ring. And sorry about that. So we're going to kick it off here a little bit by, I guess, I just want to say that I personally have found that there's a lot of things about signs that I didn't utilize properly up front. And so I guess I'm trying to help everybody that's newer to modeling to not have to reinvent the wheel as they go through this process. So first of all, let's kind of talk about the basic sign types, because we've all got that information that we live with daily about them, but trying to apply that to modeling is a little bit of a different technique. And so thinking about signs and structures in particular, let's try to keep our focus on structures and signs. We've got signs that can hang off of the sides of the structures. We've got signs that can kind of be posted on the structures. We've got signs that can be in the windows. And then we've got signs that can be, you know, kind of like leaning up against the structures or on top of the structures or whatever, to help identify what's going on, as well as help tell the scene and tell the story about that scene. It also helps set the era of that particular model, diorama, or whatever. So let's take a look at just the signs in particular and the sign types and the materials. The first thing is, and if we can go to, I don't know, Pat, I don't know if you can show my desktop or not here.
I don't know how to.
Let's see here. You got a spotlight in my phone.
Your host.
Oh, am I?
Yes, you are.
Ooh,
Pat, you can still spotlight.
You can
your
go ahead and
co-host.
spotlight just a second.
Yeah, let's see.
Spotlight everyone or spotlight.
Here.
There we go.
Let's see here. I don't know. All I'm seeing right now is Neil. So let's see here. Sorry, folks.
Pat, you have co-hosts. You should be able to spotlight.
Where's my phone?
Add spotlight or replace spotlight.
Replace.
I've got it. It's replace.
There I am. I don't want to be there. I'm out of here. Remove spotlight.
Okay, there we go. This, everybody, I'm sure people have seen this type of thing. This is nothing more than, a sheet of signs on a piece of paper that I've printed out. We're
Looks
all
good,
used
Chris.
to seeing those. So everybody knows about those, but let's talk about this a second here. And here's where I'm going to start bringing in you more advanced modelers. When you put one of these signs on a wall, there's different techniques that we can use to apply them to the wall. Now, we can go through and sand the back of them using, say, a 220 grit sandpaper, get it super thin so that basically you've just got the printing holding the sign together. And then when you apply it to the wall, if there's a brick texture or if there's a batten board or whatever texture below, basically comes through the sign. And so what you're trying to emulate then is a sign that has been painted onto the structure. My problem is when you look at those, we as a modeling group, particularly beginners, have weathered the signs so that there is rust coming down them. And is that really appropriate? So guys, what are your thoughts on this? Some of the more advanced modelers about weathering a sign that we have prepped to apply to a wall, an exterior wall.
Many of those signs were porcelain signs, so yes, rust would be appropriate.
Okay.
If you left it the same thickness, yes, that would be all right. But if you're going to sand it down, it's like a painting on a wall then.
Yeah, but oftentimes people will weather those painted on signs with rust and things. And to me, it makes sense. I can understand it if there's like nail holes or maybe a pipe or something going across it, or a, I forgot what they call those, but they're structural things that hold the structures together. Big pipes, basically, with
That's just a hanger.
yeah, or things. But a painted on sign, I normally don't consider it as being rusted. Do you guys normally use rust tones when you're doing weathering a painted on sign?
I usually use India ink or a pastel in a black, just light brushing on it, just like it's wore out, or it's running down off the brick onto the sign.
Okay.
The painted on area.
Okay. And Neil, how about you? You're one that applies a ton of signs to your structures.
Yeah, what I do, I usually print out my own. But what I do, if it's, sometimes years ago, everything wasn't glued onto the side of a building. And what I try to do, and I put on most of my signs, if it's in paper anyway, what I do is I have a very fine chalk. It's a white, off-white chalk. And I brush this on most of my signs. Why? Because, when you have a building that's 80 years old and you smack a new sign on it and the sign is brand new, I guess in real life it's possible. But by putting on a white coat of white chalk, it really fades and makes the sign look a lot older. It's sort of more in line with the age of the building. As far as painted on signs, I don't do that very much. What I do when I even have a paper sign that I print out on the computer. In fact, what you showed 2 weeks ago, most of the signs were store, banners on the top of the building. But what I do with those is I also white them out as much as I can. And on some of the signs, when I do put them on, if it's going to be on clapboard, I stick them in a little glass jar of diluted white glue, let it soak in. And then when I put them on the wall, there's not a lot of glue. There's just enough to stick them on. And then you take some kind of burnishing tool. Sometimes I just use my finger and press it into the slots on the building. And I'm not doing this to make it look like it's on the wall, but it makes it hug the building. And it's a pretty good way that I've been doing it for many years.
Okay, if I can add a couple of things here for thought on this. And some of you more advanced modelers, please step up to the conversation here as we're going through this. One of the techniques, and I picked this up from Greg Cassidy that I hadn't really considered, is to whiten the sign, as Neil calls it, or to fade the sign as you're printing it. What Cassidy does is goes through, and as he's got the sign in his photo editing program, he then chooses colors that are a little bit more white, if you will, in value. And so he grays them down even before he prints them out. And then when he prints them out, he's already got this toned down as far as darkness, whatever colors in the sign. The other thing that could be utilized, as Patrick noted, was weather or stains. And I'm wondering how many guys use more of a yellow or a very, very light, super light brown, or potentially a red even, to fade their signs depending on the color of the signs. How about Will or Fred or Gary? Have either of you guys got some feedback on that type of thing? What I'm trying to do here again is get some information out for the beginning modelers so that they're not reinventing the wheel with us.
Yeah, sometimes what I'll do with mine is I take either the Indian ink and alcohol, or I use the Hunter line stains, and do a little experimenting with the stains first, but you can weather them down with the different stains or the alcohol ink.
Okay.
Chris, what you can also do, those of you who have, one of the halfway decent digital, Photoshop setups, you can desaturate the signs. You can make them very thin, make them really light. You can change the colors on them. You can change the size on them. There's a lot of things if you want to invest. They're not a lot of money. Some of these things are free on the internet. And you can do a lot to a sign. When you put some of these things, when you buy them or you take them off the internet, they're so bright. I learned a long time ago from, I think it was Mike Chambers on Railroad Line, that when you're doing a diorama or you're doing a building, don't have too many bright colors on it. Try to use only earth tone colors and maybe only a selection of 4 or 5 colors. And I've been doing that for years. I guess today when you drive down a large highway, you see 1,000 signs with different colors. But if you're building something in the 20s or 30s, it may not have been the case. So I always stick to, if I'm putting a sign up and I feel the chalk. In fact, I just remembered that it's really not chalk I'm using. I had an old bag of hydrocal, and it is so well ground down. So you take a brush, one of the real fluffy brushes, and you just put a little layer on it, and it dulls down the colors and makes it look a little older. So that's what I do. You know, one of the other things I notice, especially with beginners, they may have a building and there's like 20 signs all over the place. And I think signs really add a lot because you're going to be looking at it and it adds something. It adds maybe a date. If you're familiar with an old product, it puts a date on the diorama. But I sometimes think it's overdone with beginners.
Okay.
Chris, I want to say one thing. I think it has a lot to do, like in brick, there's a coloring in brick that powders itself and runs off in the rain and goes over the sign.
Mhm.
So another thing too is if you're doing a lap siding wood and it's painted and it's wore out, you get a lot of the coloring coming out of the wood running down over the sign. So you have to depend on what colors you're using to run over the sign. It's coming from the material behind it.
Okay. And if we go back and look at my desktop here, and I don't know if that's showing yet or not, because I've got 4 people on my screen. If we look at a sign like this, we could use a white or a very light gray or a yellow type of color coming down. I don't know about the red or the black. Input from more advanced modelers. How about you guys? What colors, looking at this sign right here, this K-row sign, what colors would you use to color that sign versus the one that's right next to it, this I don't know, whatever it is, Salva Viada or whatever. This sign set is from a Thomas York workbook. So of the Petros Pentos fantasy type thing that he has going. So the names here, I don't know how realistic they are.
Chris, on the KO sign, I don't know how many of you guys have looked at, I think, can't remember the name of it, but these are the guys who weather the old railroad cars. And one of the things they talk about, if you want to fade a sign out, the KO sign, what I would do, I would find a color that matches the orangey background color and paint it over it, and that'll make the sign look much older. So if you have a color that you can use from the background over the foreground, it really dulls it down nicely too.
Okay. Would you add any streaks of something coming down off of the black print here, the KO? Or would you go to a darker gray? Or even a warm gray? Here we've got you can see from the tube color, kind of a warmer gray. But that's still kind of a light. Something else, but what colors, we're looking at trying to run some streaks down out of that black printing. What colors would you guys suggest? Gary, Pat, Doug, any of you guys thoughts?
I would use a little bit of powders of black, just a slight black, just to kind of weather it. Don't take much.
Yeah. Okay. How about Father Ron? Any thoughts?
I guess I would, again, a light gray, a very light gray, but I would use powders or what do you call your pastels, the light gray pastels to fade it.
Okay. Would anybody out there, well, let me digress before I ask this question. A lot of people utilize in weathering signs and the rust streaks and things of that nature, they'll use what's called a gouache. Now, gouaches are nothing more than opaque watercolors. Watercolors are designed to be transparent, but gouaches are an opaque watercolor. So they do excellent and are very easy to control to make rust streaks and things coming down signs. And if we look here, let's see here, 1, 2, 3. What am I missing here? One. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what we've got here is these are all gouaches, and you can see that the colors. Let me put them on something that might be a little bit easier to see. The colors in these are the typical colors that I grab, and then I'll also grab a white, or actually it's a cream, and then another gray. But you can buy these gouaches, and the colors are as close as they can get them to the label right here. So you've got a burnt umber, a raw umber, a burnt sienna, and these give you rust values. And then I use a Dick Van Dyke brown at times. It kind of has a reddish value hint to it when it thins out. And then I use a couple of warm grays. But is this a color set that you guys would use typically on a sign, say like that's been painted on the side of the wall, or something like that? Do you guys at all put rust on a painted on sign?
If it's a brick background, I think those colors would work with your brick. It depends on what kind of brick you have in the background that might be bleeding through your sign, or your sign wearing out and dripping down. But I wouldn't use it on a clapboard siding with white or gray, or another color. It depends on what the sign is mounted on for me.
Okay. All right. So step in here, guys.
There's another thought, is you have to stop and think about, what do you think your sign is made out of?
That's right.
That, and of course, which partially depends on the period that you're modeling. I tend to think of painted on signs as being older because it's very labor intensive. You need somebody who's an artist to actually paint the sign onto the wall, and that in later periods, advertisers or manufacturers would give stores cardboard signs, which obviously don't last very long, but they get put up in windows and the like. And then, of course, there are porcelain signs. And so porcelain signs, you do see getting dented, dinged, they get nailed up to the wall, so they get rust streaks on them. Cardboard signs fade. Painted on signs fade, and they fade to the color underneath the structure. Cardboard signs tend to just kind of gray out. And so I kind of like using weathering powders. I have a large collection of what I don't even know if they're still available. They call Bragdon's weathering powder, which is a pastel
available
powder with a little adhesive mixed in with it. And so rather than using the pastel and a fixative, I've had good luck using the Bragdon with the adhesive mixed in, and it sticks. And especially if it's not something that's going to be handled a lot, and my structures don't get handled a lot, you use the Bragdon powder, and they have lots of shades. They have grays, they have whites. And so for weathering down signs and things like that, or just things that you want to look a little bleached out, that they've been outdoors, I like a light weathering powder to just give it that faded look.
Okay. Real good point. If I can step back for just a moment here, we a couple of times have talked about the material that the signs are made out of. So we've got, starting from the paper sign, which is nothing more than basically a billboard. Say the circus billboard type things that were put up on the side of a wall. If we yellow those or gray them down, I think they work well. And then of course you can always rip them up a little bit and roll up the ends a little bit to make it look like it's curling. And those are some of the techniques that have been utilized there. The painted on signs, we can go out to the internet and find 88 dozen different ways to apply the signs. But in general, what it is, if it's a paper printed sign, you thin down the paper super thin, usually by sanding it from the back. You may then use a little bit of sandpaper on the front of the sign, potentially to weather it a little bit, to dull it down a little bit, and to add some streaks to it. Basically, those streaks are enhanced or highlighted when you apply stains. You can also mount it on something and then mount it on a wall or whatever. And so that would be one kind of sign. Another type of sign, and I don't know if, let me backtrack here. If we go to a bigger sign like this, if that's not painted on, what would that, a large sign such as this one be, what would they make that on? I mean, this is probably, well, if I take a look at it, in O scale, it's going to be about a 6 foot sign, 7 foot. Well, actually, I'm sorry, it's closer to 8 foot going across. So we have an 8 foot by roughly 5 foot sign.
Chris,
What would they be made out of?
Chris, I think they would put that on a painted on boards with a frame around it. Then you could make it look like it's wear out or wearing into the boards itself on the framework. It's too big to be put on the building without having a frame around it to hold it there. Then you could put screws through it or some sort of bolts or something to hold it on the building. But to have just a plain sign that big, just put on a building, that's awfully big to have something to hold it there.
What material did they use? Does anybody have any clues on what materials they used, say back in the 30s, 20s, or something to create a sign like that? Did they print them on metal or what?
They would
Chris.
probably be porcelain.
Porcelain, really? That'd be a heavy sign.
That's a big sign.
A lot of billboards are just printed on paper. You see them, they were applied almost like wallpaper that the sign hanger would slop on adhesive like wallpaper paste, and then a big sign would come in multiple rolls in vertical slices to create the whole billboard.
Okay.
When I was in Rome, when I was in Rome, I saw people actually putting up some of those signs. They were perhaps 6 to 8 feet tall, slapping them on sides of buildings and on walls here and there and everywhere. They carried a bucket and a scrub brush. Scrub brush is probably around 8 to 10 inches wide. They dip it in the paper mache or solution or whatever it is, scrub the wall, and then slap up going from the bottom to the top, slap up the sign right on the side of the wall. So it was made out of paper, most of those in Rome. And you see like 100 of them on the side of a wall, not just one, because they were paid by how many signs they put up. So they just plastered the sign of a wall with all of these billboard type of operas and all kinds of stuff. But it was a paste solution they slapped on the wall first.
Okay, does anybody have any clue on how long those paste solutions would last in normal weather conditions? And I'm thinking of the North America at this point.
Not very long. Because the paste would, with the weather, rain and everything else, it would just, start wearing out the corners and the sides and the top. It would start to wash away from the building itself, feather
Okay,
out.
okay,
Sometimes they put signs on top of signs, and it's the ones underneath that lasted the longest.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Okay, so that kind of takes care of, now let's stick with this billboard thing. When we stuck them up on this billboard type of sign, and say it's going over a board and bat type of structure or siding. Do you guys do anything in particular to emulate the kind of where the bats and that seam would be? I mean, do you push in real hard or use a sponge after you've made the sign real wet for a while and the paper basically stretches? And so you use a sponge to blot it as an applicator, or maybe a paintbrush, or maybe they're called silicone brushes, or hard, they're little silicone type brushes to apply it, or even the side of a credit card or a business card or something. What are some of the techniques that you guys do? I'm kind of avoiding the finger because a lot of times, as you guys that are experienced know, that unless your finger is wet to a certain degree, when you go to touch the sign, you end up pulling it off. But I'm going to shut up and grab something while you guys talk.
I've used a toothpick, a round toothpick, and just roll it across the sign.
You could also use a dental tool.
Okay, the back of a dental tool or the front
Back
edge?
end, the back end, Chris, that's the only way you don't use the pointed end. You want to use a blunt end of it.
Yeah, so
Just push lightly, otherwise you'd rip through it.
yeah, so I don't know if we can focus on my desktop again. So ching, ching.
There you are.
So you've got this type of a thing. So you come in and be using it from the back side, kind of like this.
Mhm.
That's one type of dental tool to use. These are the type of, and this is a silicone
Mhm.
type thing. And I was wondering, do any of the more advanced modelers use anything like these?
Yeah, Chris, I would think, I'm just talking off the top of my head here, that if you have a batten board building, probably even back then, they would probably, nail on the highest points, where the outs, usually the things between the boards, keeping the water out, and probably an inch out, and just go from one of these things to another, instead of trying to cram it into those spots. I mean, that's my guess, not based on anything that I've ever seen.
You bring up a real good point for those that are really into the super details. Did they put like a small frame using 1x1, 1x1s, 1x2s going around the sign to help hold it up? Anybody know?
I've done that a few times.
Okay, well, I've done it on myself, but I was wondering if if anybody knows it was more of a common practice than what we typically see, and if there's any real tricks to that application.
Watching the Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah.
If these pickers pick these old signs are from that era, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And these cardboard signs, a lot of them that they pick have got frames on them.
Okay. That's interesting. And the frames, what do you think were they wood? Were they metal?
They were wood.
Okay. And do you have any clue or guesstimates as to the thickness or the board size?
Someone would be 2-inch thick around the outside edges, and the framework itself, and the backing would be 1-inch wood if
Okay.
it's that old.
Okay. All
'Cause they
right.
didn't have plywood then,
Okay.
back in the 30s and the early 40s, that I
Okay.
know of.
All right.
I think you're right. I think they're painted on boards.
Yep.
Not painted on plywood, but for example, I do the signage I have a general store. I have a hardware store where I've made my own signs, and I emulate that kind of sign that it was probably painted by hand painted by a sign painter onto boards, and it's framed and mounted on the side of the building. It's intended to be more durable as opposed to the advertising stuff. I don't think that gets framed. If that's cardboard or whatever, it just gets tacked up to the side of the building.
That's right.
Okay. Let me kind of change the gears a little bit here and talk about a different kind of sign. And I'll hold this up here a little bit. Come on. So these are metal signs, or designed to be metal signs. This is actually printed on a foil. These are from Vintage Reproductions, which are no longer available to my knowledge. But this is actually a foil. Have any of you guys worked with these foil type signs? And the idea here was you would wrap the sign around a piece of wire or something to give it the two sides, and then have it hanging out of the side of like above a door or something, so that you could see it from the side. Anybody work with something like this, or have any ideas on how to emulate that?
I can comment on the sign that you're showing, the Railway Express Agency sign. One of the things in my collection is an original one of those, which is, it's porcelain on a heavy gauge metal sheet and has got grommet holes in the corner to hang it, and undoubtedly hung out in front of a station or a store, or somebody that was a Railway Express Agency, and those were furnished by Railway Express to their vendors. More directly to your question, two-sided signs, the only way I've done those is off of cardstock, where you make a sandwich. You make two of the same sign and include a little bit of wire at the top so that it can stand out perpendicular from the wall.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff.
Chris, I want to raise a point here, and this is open to everybody who's listening. A couple of years ago on the railroad line, somebody who was in the printing business sort of cautioned, put a couple of threads in about using printing that is out of the age that you are making your building. And so in other words, if you're going to make your own sign, certain printing fonts were not used. And a lot of us, probably including myself, have been using what we think we like as far as the fonts. Now, the controversy is this. He said if you're not using specific fonts and lettering in the date that you're making your building, it's all wrong. On the other hand, if you look at some of these old vintage buildings, there's a site on the internet, and he does is show old signs. And in some of these buildings, mercantile buildings, there's like 12 different kinds of fonts on there. So I'm opening this up to everybody. When I making a sign, I always think about it, and then I hate myself because I can't find a font that I like within that period of time. And am I making a big boo-boo here? So I'm opening this up. Anybody have any comments on that?
Of course, some of them are hand painted. It's really amazing to see people who have the ability to hand paint
That's right,
lettering
yeah.
that looks
Yeah.
like it's printed is just astounding to me. And so you kind of wonder, okay, you've got a professional sign painter and the hardware store wants a sign that says hardware on it. The font kind of comes out of his head, doesn't it?
I think a lot of it, if you know how to do calligraphy, it really helps. Yeah.
It is. It's these fonts with all kinds of flourishes and curves and almost like somebody is handwriting it. So every time I'm making a sign, I say, I'm going to get yelled at or I'm going to be criticized because this doesn't fit into the time period. But my stuff's not going into a museum. So what do I do?
Yeah, well, I guess my only thought about all of that, and you bring up a really, really good point, Neil, about the fonts, but is going back to that 2-foot rule, the flourishes, as you call it, or the, I've forgotten the
Serifs. They're called serifs.
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 Thank you. That's serfs and stuff. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Those things in HO scale and stuff, are they really going to show? So is it worth worrying about that? Is that something that you want to consider? I guess as a modeler, you need to consider, is this something I'm going to be entering into a contest where I can point out, hey, all of my signs are font appropriate to the judges? That's going to gain you a point or two. If it's just for your home layout, and particularly if it's on a background model, is it something that you're doing for yourself, or are you doing it for the model? I guess if you're printing them out, it doesn't take that much work to print them out, but I don't know. I'm just kind of bringing up a couple of pros and cons.
Chris, I think
maybe it's for the bean counters. Not
Yeah,
yours.
yeah. Okay.
Chris, I think also your mind supplies stuff. Some of the arguments that have been made about whether to mortar brick or not in HO and N scale in particular, your mind supplies things. So even if you're working with a font that's got a serif in HO or N scale where you can barely see the serif, your mind's going to supply it because it recognizes the font and knows that it's a serif font. So, you can use it even though you're not going to see it because your mind will supply it. And I think that's important to keep in mind in modeling, is that while you want to be exact and precise, sometimes you are inadvertently, even if you lose the serif or lose the mortar in the process, because people's minds supply for it. Now it's only in the rivet counters who are looking at this to award a point or two to someone's model that will look with a magnifying glass for the serif. But I think for most of us, what we can suggest is often sufficient.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other thoughts on this whole topic here that we're kind of talking about? Okay, let me change sign types one more time, since it was brought up that a couple of times now that we're talking the porcelain type of signs. How many have gone through and done something where you've made a porcelain sign, but you've tried to enhance it so that you get a reflective aspect off of the sign.
That's using gloss coat on top of it, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a Mod Podge on top of this. So as you can see, I get a reflection off of
Looks-
this.
Looks
this
good.
particular sign. So when we talk about the porcelain signs and things, what do you guys do to emulate porcelain signs?
Rusty edges a little bit.
Bullet holes.
That's right too. Never thought of that.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts?
Nail holes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you
Bird
guys
poop.
do anything? Am I the only idiot out here that is taking Mod Podge and putting it over sheets of
They-
signs to create porcelain signs?
It's something I
that's-
never thought
That's
of.
new to me, Chris.
Yep.
I'd never thought of that.
It's a nice idea.
Okay. Yeah, because that's something I do to a lot of my structures up front. And depending on how you apply the porcelain, or excuse me, the Mod Podge, I have gotten signs so glossy that if I mount them, like one, I have it mounted up against the wall, but yet there's a staircase in front of it, and the staircase is shown like a mirror in the sign. So, and when I photographed it, I started getting, you know, the stairs going up in this sign. So, depending on how you apply that, you're going to get different types of aspects of that showing up. Anybody else use any other techniques to create the reflective aspect of the old signs?
I think you could use gloss coat, could you not?
I would think so.
It should work.
Let's see here. The other thing that you could use is a varnish of some sort,
Mhm.
you know, a spray varnish. But I pulled out this one because this is a decal type of sign. And we've all used decals or decals.
Spotlight it, Chris. We can't. There we go.
There we go. So, I mean, you can see the decal edge here and things of this nature. Quite frankly, I can't find my other decal box right now, so that's why I yanked this one out, guys. But you can see the decal edge. If we're going back to that whole thing about the decals and applying decals, we all know about using setting solutions. Do any of you guys use setting solutions on a paper sign or on dry transfers?
No, I haven't. Wouldn't it affect your paper back if you use a setting solution?
It can.
It's basically your setting solution is softening the carrier and the decal. I use
Right.
tons of it to get it to settle into wood siding and things like that.
But he put it on a piece of cardboard, so that's what he was asking, if anybody used that setting solution on top of that decal. I don't know.
It just broke a model, but anyway. Bear with me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. Tink, tink, tink. We all know about picking up models and dropping them. I get to put a foundation back on my
ISOs,
no, it's a
work
little
shed.
shack, yeah. It's one of those make and take clinics.
Spotlight.
It's one of them.
It's better on your phone.
Okay, yeah, I've got it underneath the phone.
There you are.
Chink. Thank
There
you,
you go.
whoever did that. Dry transfer, guys. So that's a dry transfer, but I did use like 6 or 7 coats of, you know, a
Setting
steel
solution?
coat. Yeah, setting solution on this. So, you know, it is something that you can utilize. And here again is a little sign that has, this one just has a little bit of a spray varnish on it, but not much for my porcelain signs. It was before I
Looks good.
discovered the idea of applying Mod Podge. So,
Looks good.
But my point here is that this is a dry transfer. You guys can use the stuff on a dry transfer. And I've done it with paper, and was hoping to have a paper one available. So here we have.
Yep. Oh,
Um,
there.
our typical signs that we put on. And I think this is probably about how 90% of us apply our signs. Is that not correct? Would you guys agree with that?
Hmm.
But if you'll notice here, I did try to pick up some of the underlying clapboard texture.
Mhm.
The other thing about this model is that you can use the decal setting solution, and if you really use it a lot, and this I think was a dry transfer if I recall correctly. Again, you can get those really to look like a paint.
Mhm.
If you really
Move it up a
bring
little.
down. Yeah, I'm trying to hold it up and hold it steady without shaking.
There. Just let it sit on the thing.
Well, it's sitting on my hand and I'm holding it, so it's shaky. Sorry, guys. But
The setting solution is actually dissolving the ink a little bit.
Mhm.
okay. But so we've got decals, which we can apply. We've got paper signs, which we can apply. We've got foil, which we can utilize. We've got dry transfers. This doesn't show very well, which we can utilize. Let's see here. Dry transfers. Let's talk about, you know, here's a dry transfer. So you've got dry transfers. You know, and you can also get a lot of different font types, which we've kind of discussed a little bit in your dry transfers. And then we have, let me open this up just real quick here.
Bruce, while you're doing that, you're at your 1 hour.
Okay, thank you. We have decals. Now, some decals like this one here, we already have the brick texture imprinted on the decal. This is from Dave's Decals, by the way, for those that are interested, but you can see that he actually puts the brick texture into the decal. How that works when you apply it to a brick textured building, and if the brick texture sizes are of brick texture, the bricks are of different sizes. I'm not sure how that all comes out, but just food for thought. Anyway, so we've got, and we probably can't see it, but there's brick textures in the font here on the mail pouch and stuff. Let's see here, what other kind of decals are,
Is that paper or decal, did you say?
this is a decal. They're
Okay.
actually, it's from Dave's Decals. The thing about Dave's Decals, if you ever go to buy some of his products, the ones from my experience, is that it's a heavier decal. So you can get pretty aggressive with these suckers. They take sanding and things pretty well. And he's got a little bit heavier decal paper than what you'll see in, say, some of the military modelers and things of that nature. But anyway, yeah, and if you go to his website, he even talks about you can get pretty aggressive with his decals.
Another thing to throw in on decals is sometimes you don't have to soak them off of the paper. Depending on what you want to do with it, you can leave the decal right on the backing paper and treat it like a card sign that way.
Oh, really? That's something I'd never thought of. Any other tricks? Come on, guys, we got a lot of experience out there. I know you guys are hiding tricks, and come on, speak up, confess.
What kind of trick you looking for, Chris?
I don't have any tricks, Chris. I've always failed with decals or decals.
Oh, dear.
Okay, well, no, let's talk about the signs. We're talking about signs, but I mean, decals are just one type of sign that we can get into.
I have another one, Chris.
Okay, go.
If you look at that building in the background that I have on my background,
Okay,
spotlight it.
yes, that's good. And I meant to bring that up earlier. Go on ahead and talk away there, Pat.
Anyway, that building I have right there in the background, I put plastic lettering for raised letters on the building itself, and they were colored already. And then if you see in the corner of that picture, there's a sign that I put from paper on a cardboard backing to make it look like a metal sign, and I put it above in the left-hand corner. And then on the light pole out front, I did the same thing with the double-sided sign. You can't see it, but I made all that myself, and I put that on a hanger, and it does move back and forth. So when I put the cardboard in between the two pieces of the decal, or not decal, but picture, I put the wires that have an eye on the end right into the cardboard. Then I ran the hangers to a rod that I had sticking out from the light pole. And it worked out pretty good. I was quite pleased with it. But now I got to go back and add a little bit of that fancy weathering you guys have been talking about,
Okay. Well, we'll get into the weathering techniques next week a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about the signs and the application, gross application of signs. And I'd like to hear some ideas from you guys where you have used signs to hide some modeling errors, particularly on the corners. and corner gaps. Any thoughts about any of that out there, guys?
I think we all done that.
Okay, but let's hear some experiences. Come on, guys. Talk up.
Trim covers sloppy work, paint covers sloppy trim.
Okay. Well, how do you guys use signs? If you blow it, let's say some corners. Let's start off with corners and things like that, because that's where people run into issues, particularly if they're working in something like a foam or a resin or a plaster type structure, or even potentially styrene if you didn't cut your styrene well and you're not into using some modeling putty. You've got gaps. How do you guys use signs to cover those corners, and signed recommendations or anything that you might have for that type of thing?
Yeah, my rule is if it's more than 2 inches, I use ivy, clinging ivy.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so
If
you're
it's
using a
smaller,
vegetation. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've used things like downspouts, which is a real common thing, and even tree trunks and leaning lumber and ladders and things like that up against it. But I'm trying to focus in on signs. Is there anybody that's used like a sign wrapped around a corner?
Not exactly a sign, but I've made trim boards out of paper and colored them, and then lined the corner with new trim boards made out of paper, which
Okay.
covers up any gaps.
Okay. How about using signs for other mistakes and things on the structures? Have you guys used them for any of that?
I've never used a sign on a corner. I've never thought about that. Would they really do that?
Well, I've seen signs bent around the corners of
Really?
like barns and things of that nature. So in the Colorado area. I've actually somewhere in my archive of pictures from God, I think it was either Leadville or maybe it was up Clear Creek Canyon someplace, because I used to live real close to that neck of the woods and grow up there in every weekend going up somewhere up there.
Going back to
I have some
pickers.
pictures of something going around a corner, and I think there's one on if we go back to one of the mines, it's actually near one of the mine heads has it that's there outside of Central City. So it's a famous kit too. Anyway,
You
so
just
yeah.
gave me you just gave me an idea. Going back to pickers again, how often they see that signs have been used to patch a building, wooden barn side or something where the wood is rotten and they've nailed the metal sign over it. It hadn't occurred to me that you could do that on a weathered building, and you could even turn the sign sideways or upside down. It's there because it's a patch. It's not advertising.
They did that a lot on roofs.
Yeah, that's another good suggestion.
Yeah, the signs were utilized a lot in some of the things. This is if we spotlight my thing again here. Hang on a second. I'm trying to find the right page. Rat poison. This one kind of went south on me today, guys. But looking at this thing here, this is
Here sideways, turn it the other way.
Okay, well.
There you go.
Yeah, unfortunately.
That's
yeah,
okay.
I can't see it.
There, whoop,
Yeah,
turn it the other way.
Unfortunately, guys, you're gonna have to live with me. I can't see the computer screen and try to hold this in the right orientation. So it's one of these type of things. But yeah, this is from Thomas
Right,
York.
turning it 90-degree left.
Yeah. Well, if I
There you go.
problem of it is I can't see the trying to get it so that I can't see the screen to see what I'm showing.
You're seeing fine. You're just great. They're right there. Just talk.
But what I'm trying to say is, if we go to something like this right here, you could stick a porcelain sign over something like this.
Exactly.
And in Thomas York's, he's in this little plan set he has. He's actually got some where they've done that, and I couldn't find it off the top of my head, but anyway, that's where this set of signs comes from. The next thing I wanted to talk about real quick is signs in windows. What type of materials are you using for signs? Have any of you guys like mounted it on styrene, or are you using tissue paper, or are you using just regular printouts, or how are you applying the signs, and what glues are you guys tending to use when you're working on windows? Neil's a good one at this because Neil has, we've already spotlighted you, Neil, because you do a lot of those type of structures.
I've done a few, and I was just going to ask, how do you take a sign, put it right in the middle of the acetate window without the glue showing? So that was a question I have for open to anybody.
I have used crystal clear on the back of it. Would be the front of it, and then stick it to the. It would stay there very well. Or you could use a sticky glue, but you want to use something that'll disappear and be clear.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Crystal clear works pretty good for that.
Okay. I have run into that problem, and my solution was to build a small, I don't want to call it a framework, but I took two longer boards and stuck it across the distance, the back side of the sign where those boards were hidden, and then put a sign or two signs so that they kind of ran past the windows a little bit, or used a shades and then the sign in between the shades. But the sign was actually mounted to the front of those two boards, and then those two boards, it was square strip wood, was attached to the sides of the interior wall to the window opening, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think the diorama you showed last 2 weeks ago, there's the window, which is frosted with the dull coat, so it's a frosty look. And what I did, I took the sign, I mounted it on another piece of acetate and pressed it against it. But it was like the thing that it was cemented to was pressed against the frosted window, so you don't really see the back one. So I did the same thing.
Yeah, but you used acetate, which actually would have been a better solution than my solution, because I ended up having to hide stuff in a couple of structures, and I used shades or something to kind of hide them.
Yeah.
So
and that's what's very challenging about this hobby. You're always going to run into something, and you have to figure out the solution to a problem where you ditch the whole thing. And you usually come up with something that works. And that's one of the challenges in this hobby.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I'm trying to bring up here, is that we can use signs not only to help tell the scene, help set the era, help detail it and guide your eye through the scene. But also, you can just do so much with signs, and that's why it's just not a 29-cent type of thing it's not an afterthought, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Chris, I sprayed my paper signs with matte finish and then used the tester's cement for clear parts just on the top edge or the side edge of the sign and put it on the acetate. Very, very little glue, but it's the clear parts cement type of stuff, or Formula 560 or whatever they call it, which ends up being clear to begin with. Again, your eye is supplying for it. If you're looking with a magnifying glass, you'll probably see the glue. But if you're not, if you're looking at it from a distance, you won't see it.
Okay.
Chris, somebody on YouTube, Dave BNSF and Skill, says he used a micro crystal clear.
Okay. Yeah, that's in N scale, I would imagine that works really well. I think it was Pat that was saying he used crystal clear. Pat, are you still there? Pat's muted.
Pat's away from his desk right now.
Okay. Okay, but yeah, that's a real good point from YouTube, that that's good material. I'd like to get some additional input on that. Has anybody that's used the crystal clear thing had any problems with brush strokes or the crystal clear not leveling correctly?
I haven't used it, so I can't answer your question.
Okay. Anybody else out there? Come on, guys.
Yeah, the nice thing about crystal clear is if you make a mistake, it just pick it off, start again, and it will flatten.
Okay. I don't use that product, so I can't speak to it a whole lot, and that's why I'm really dependent on you guys to speak up on it.
It's also water soluble, so if you don't like it, a little dab of water will remove it.
Okay. All right. So let's see here. What else about structure signs have we got going? The other thing we haven't talked about is putting signs up on the roofs and things. Are there, we're all familiar with the old billboard technique and things like that, but how many of you have utilized like a stencil to like paint a sign on the roof that the old aviators used to use, or even paint a stencil on the side of a structure? Have any of you guys used stencils at all?
I would think that I've seen someone said mail pouch on the top of the roof. Used to see that a lot.
Yeah, if quite frankly, I don't know how many of you guys are old pilots, but when I was learning to fly back, and I was late to the game then, back in the 60s, one of the things that was still on the aviation maps back then were sometimes they'd be noted that certain places have a sign on the roof, and the aviators used to use those as navigation waypoints. And they were real important going back a little bit earlier, back to the 30s and stuff, because some of the mail was actually delivered from aircraft. And those guys would use those roof signs to know exactly where they were at, as well as get them pointed the right way for landing in the various airfields that they had to utilize back then. So, painting a sign on a roof is not particularly if it's an older type sign, it's not that bad. And I know that there was a issue back in the 60s, mid 60s, where somebody had painted a sign that was sitting underneath the air traffic pattern for landing for O'Hare Airport. But the sign they painted on their roof said, "Welcome to Toledo." And the FAA had to make them remove that sign because of issues that it created with passengers. So yeah, there's a lot that you can do with signs on that. But stencils, have you guys used stencils and created your own stencils, and any tricks on that?
I did create a stencil for a building I did, but it wasn't for the roof. And the problem with the stencil is that in some of the letters, you have to either put the middle in, or you have to link it to the side in order to use it. And then you have to paint over the link afterwards. So what I did was I used double-sided type of, or a single-sided pressure sensitive type of material to put the sign together, and cut out where I wanted the paint to go. And it worked. It took 2 attempts. The first attempt didn't work, and I had to do it a second time. But I did get it on there. And it did a pretty good job.
Okay. What I was hoping is that somebody out there might have some experience using like a laser cutter to create some stencils. Has anybody done any of that? Boy, there's 15 of us here and none of us have any experience.
Can't afford a laser cutter myself. So.
You got that right.
I hear you. But yeah, but there was, what is the name of that thing? Rich, it's that little stencil cutter type thing that you've been talking about. You said you got 2 of them. Creepo. Cricut. Thank you. Yeah, there we go. Nobody's used a Cricut, because that's a stencil cutter, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Has anybody used a Cricut to create stencils to anything like this?
I've used one to create larger stencils for the side of a module. But we have a friend of ours, he uses it to create buildings.
Okay.
I think one of the guys who works for Model Railroader and Trains Magazine did a sign for one of their kit bashes that they did in the past for a building that he put together. And he used a Cricut. Well, it wasn't a Cricut. It was, I think, a Brother. The same sort of a concept. It was a stencil cutter. And he detailed that online. I don't remember which episode it was.
Okay. And Rich, I got your message. So thank you. If somebody pops on YouTube, just type it in and we'll try to capture it there. Thanks. The guy monitoring the YouTube is having some issues right now. Okay. Let's see here. So any other thoughts about adding signs to the roof, though? Because we can use pretty much any type of signs. I'm just wondering if there's any other thoughts to using signs or creating signs for roofs.
I've got one other that hasn't been mentioned so far. Years ago in Pennsylvania, I found a terrific hand-painted large sign for anthracite coal, an anthracite coal dealer, and it was local to the area, the phone number and everything. I loved the sign, and I said, boy, I'd like to have that on my model railroad. And with a bit of effort, I took a color photograph of the sign and made sure the lighting was good and that I got it square side to side and top to bottom so you didn't have a perspective problem. Had the photograph printed to the size I needed and cut out the sign from the photograph, put it on a backing, and it ended up as a billboard on the roof of the coal dealership on my railroad.
Okay, okay, there we go. So actual photographs of something, quite frankly, I'd never thought of that.
That's how I did the sign on the side of the building there in San Antonio. It was for a candy company, and I took the photograph and corrected it in Microsoft's, not Microsoft, Adobe Illustrator, and got it to square, and then used that to trace the font, because it was a particular font that's not available anywhere. So I had to create the stencil myself. But I used a photograph.
Okay, interesting.
Butcher was trying to present something.
Yeah, I just want to say I've got a building that was in the corner of my layout, and I wanted to present a sign where I could see it from two different angles. So I scratch built this,
Hmm.
and it's just done with decals. And I thought it'd be better if I could view it from both directions.
Good point. Because most of us tend to think of signs, either just from the front or from the front and back. We don't think of that angled sign. So good application. And there you go. We were asking about a way to hide corners. There you go, right there. Maybe have it stick off the corner a little bit with a post underneath of it or something. But yeah, that's a good point. Angled signs, because we really haven't covered those and or think about them, and that's kind of unique. And we do see those on occasion on rooftops. So
I work with Lexan a lot, and I've been trying to put together some box signs made from Lexan. And the problem I was having was the LEDs I was using were too big. And it wasn't, the LEDs are the light is so concentrated that it would make bright spots on the front of the sign. And I'm trying to find a way to reduce the bright spots. I thought about adding more light, but what I really need to do is change the LEDs so that I can set them further back, because I couldn't find a diffuser that's thin enough to use on the signs. So, I mean, it was just something I've been working on. I haven't got anything to show you right at the moment, but.
yeah, well, we really didn't go into trying to light signs, because that, quite frankly, is a whole hobby within the hobby, in my book, at least.
It's
Yeah, it's a
another
can of
rabbit hole,
worms.
Chris.
Yeah, it's a different rabbit hole, but it belongs to a cousin, that's for sure. But it is a good point. Like Pat's showing on the back of he's got his signs lighted. So we've had some discussions on lighting, but it's a real good point about lighting signs, and we really haven't addressed it here, unfortunately. But and let's see here. I think it was Doug. I think there was a question that you had pre-show that we were going to bring up.
Yes, I guess whoever, Pat or somebody, whoever's got the info, a while back we were talking about people, vendors that have LEDs, and Pat mentioned about a person or a website on eBay, and somehow I didn't get that. I was wondering if somebody or Pat could put that on the chat here so I could copy it down.
It's called We Honest. WEHONEST.
See, I'm sorry. Say that again.
WEHONEST.
Okay.
EST.
AST.
EST. Just like it sounds. We Honest.
Like Honest Abe.
You got it. You'll be sorry.
.com, .com.
No, just go on to eBay and print it in the search form. It'll come up.
Search going.
Then you'll be sorry.
Well, there's supposed to be a guy on there, a friend of mine, he passed away a while back, but he got a good deal on double pull, double throw, center off switches, and you could
He's
get
got that too.
more. Huh?
He's got it too.
Or- Yeah, I ordered 20 of them, and they were originally $2 a piece, but if you order like 20 or so, you get them for less than $2 a piece.
Mhm.
You say this guy, this is.
He's
worth-
got that stuff too. Yeah. That's why I say
Okay.
you're going to be sorry.
Thank you, guys.
No problem.
Okay, okay. Well, guys, we're coming up on an hour and a half here today, and I want to be respectful to everything with your time and energies and everything dedicated to this show. Again, I'm going to be taking a little bit of heat on this show because I am kind of going out with a different format. But signs, when I originally envisioned this whole thing, I set aside 3 different shows for this because it's just, to me, such an important subject, and covers a lot more than just, the 15-minute tutorial of here's how to weather a sign. Speaking of weathering, next week's show is going to be more focused on the actual weathering of signs, and we'll take a look at some different techniques. So if any of you more advanced modelers have some signs that you've kind of weathered using some techniques that you would like to share, I would love to see them. In particular, going back to the lead in of this show where we were discussing using the colors of the sign versus just the everyday rust colors, that would be extremely helpful to the conversations on this. So does anybody else have any comments, thoughts, suggestions on signs, or any parting words with the overall gist of signs that we're talking about here? And
Yeah, can you hear me, Chris?
Go.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, here's this is a sign. I don't know if you can see it. Probably not because of the
Because of your background.
Your background.
basically what it is.
Right. Oh, down.
Yeah.
Back up a little.
Here, you see that Coca-Cola sign?
Yep.
Yep.
That's an actual metal sign from a pop can.
Ah, okay.
Here a while back. And you have to keep an eye on what Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever are doing, but they do print every once in a while a can, and you can actually salvage signs off those cans. And they make a very impressive sign. I have the large Coke bottle. It's probably about maybe 2.5 inches long, and I put 2 of them back to back on a tall Texaco sign, and they were put on the bottom, and just to as a sponsor of Coca-Cola. It looks and they're actually quite nice. Now you can with a little bit of weathering in that. This one's not weathered, but you can weather them down or even rust them.
Okay, yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to take any of that, those metal signs and weather them through a photo etchant?
No, Pat and I were talking about that yesterday.
Ah,
And-
okay.
and-
I didn't know anything about that conversation, so.
And I'm always afraid of putting them in there and they dissolve.
Well,
That's what we were talking about, putting the metal in there, especially corrugated siding, and you put it in there, if you're not on it, it'll dissolve very fast.
yeah, yeah, we'll get into that when we get into roofing and stuff, but yeah, you're absolutely right. But a lot of tricks to that stuff. Okay, but I was just wondering, because on signs, I could see where that'd be potentially a real interesting technique. I guess I bring that up, guys, is the reason being here for you more experienced modelers. This morning, I've got to tell you guys, I got out a new razor because I got a new razor pack yesterday in the mail from Harry's Razor. I've been
Oh, you got
shaving
hooked,
for
did you?
50, yeah, I've been shaving for 50 years now. And I used that, it's a 4-bladed razor. I've never had a 4-bladed razor before in 50 plus years of shaving. And I took one stroke and it's like, it's Mikey. He likes it, you know? My point being here, guys, try other stuff, you know, to keep your modeling fresh. Don't be afraid to get in there and try some other stuff because, you know, particularly with the weathering of signs and things, because you're not losing anything more than really your time is the most valuable thing you're losing. So, you know, or this is the most expensive thing. So try to feel free to do the other things that we experience in modeling and share this. If you're on YouTube, I want to thank you for your time. If you have questions, comments, etc., please feel free to write us with it. And please join us next week. As usual, I'll give the old spiel of subscribe, push that button and do your thing there. It is appreciated on the backside. And I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm going to go on ahead and have the guys cut it off. And for those that are on the Zoom call, we'll do a post-mortem on this show for just a couple of minutes afterwards. And thank you for joining us. Everybody have a good week. Happy modeling. And we'll talk to you later. And Pat, if you want to kill the feeds, please.
I can do that.
Show again, Chris.
Thank you.
Did you want to stop the YouTube too?